time for the Severe MMA Preview Show with Sean Sheehan, Spencer Kite, Harry Powell, and your host, Ian O'Neill.
UFC 283 is just a couple of days away, lads. The first pay-per-view installment of 2023, and we have a double set of titles on the line. Glover Teixeira and Jamahal Hill will fight for the vacant light heavyweight championship, while two gentlemen that are very familiar with each other, Deiveson Figueiredo, will take on Brandon Moreno in the co-main event. How are we doing all tonight, gentlemen? Shawnee in some new settings here, living the life of luxury down there in Newcastle West. Harry Powell is with me as always from London. Spencer Kite, my Canadian brethren, is with us in Abbotsford. And me, I'm here in snowy Saskatoon. I hope you're all well. I hope everyone is listening as well. Well, lads, are we looking forward to this card? I'm going to leave that an open-ended question. Who wants it? Are we looking forward to this card? On a scale to 1 to 10, in pay-per-views, it's not too bad. It's not too bad. It's touching on an 8 for me, I think. What do you think, Sean?
I don't know if I go as high as an 8, but I am looking forward to it. The quadrilogy, as I'm going to continue to call it, shout out to my guy Blake Harrison, is a fight that I am massively looking forward to, and I think it should have probably happened earlier, but look, we're getting it now, so that's all well and good. I won't complain about that. Everyone knows how big of a fan I am of Jamahal Hill and how I've championed him for the last couple of years. Your boy Ankalaev got there. He wasn't able to pull it off. So maybe my guy will be able to prove me right for once in the last 2 years. And also Glover Teixeira, someone I admired him for a long time, but I also not just admired him as a fighter, not just admired him as a person for a long time. I admire the way his game has improved so much over the last few years. Maybe a lot of people call it maybe the twilight of his career, and how he has really put all those things together. You know, myself and Harry often talk about it in Speaker's Corner about when does the intelligence, the game planning, the craft meet the athletic ability before it goes down. And Glover Teixeira seems to have met that at a later stage of his career than most people, I suppose. And then on the undercard after that, there are lots of fun fights. You know, Gilbert Burns is on the card, just looking at it here. Jessica Andrade, Paul Craig against Johnny Walker and the Celtic Clash. So yeah, really looking forward. I give it a solid 7 out of 10, which is pretty good. Yeah,
pretty good indeed. And I mean, you know, you touched on the two fighters there excellently as well. But just to speak about Glover Teixeira first, Spencer, I mean, like Sean, he said, to find and to get himself into a position in the later stages of his career, for me, looking on, has been sensational. Obviously, I'm a guy who came up watching Chuck Liddell and involvement in the pit, and seeing Glover coming through there, seeing John Hackelman in his corner as well, is just great sense of nostalgia when I'm watching Glover Teixeira there. I mean, he's a legend of the game. He's going to go down in history in UFC, but I think, you know, it's kind of like, it's been a cult following for Glover Teixeira for the longest time, but now he has the chance to kind of get in there and become a 2-time champion in the light heavyweight division, and it really cements his status as if you want to call it a UFC legend.
Yeah, before he got to the UFC, he was the boogeyman outside of the division that you heard about, that trained with Chuck, that if he could get here, he's going to make waves. And he got there and he made waves, and he worked his way into a championship opportunity, lost to John Jones. Things kind of uneven for a couple of years there. And he's even talked about it, right? He was dealing with some injuries, didn't have some good results, had a couple moments where he was like, well, if this shit continues, I'm just going to stop, because I don't want to be doing this, where I'm getting knocked out by Gus and losing to Corey Anderson and stuff like that. Rattled off a bunch of wins the title. Beautiful performance against Jan Błachowicz, has that fight with Yuri Prochazka. And you sort of felt like he's the guy that got screwed, right? He was the odd man out of UFC 282. And you felt like, how is that the guy you're doing dirty? The guy that's just, you know, he's 43, he's put in all the time, done all the stuff. And if you watch the countdown show, and I don't know if it actually made the countdown show itself. So behind the curtain, I got the full video to put a story together on gloverforufc.com. And like, they asked him about it, and he was like, yeah, I mean, it sucked. Like, I was pissed in the moment, but what am I going to do? Be angry forever? Like, things are going to work out. So he went to that show and he watched it and sat with Alex Pereira, and They get a draw and he gets backstage and they're like, cool, do you want to fight in Brazil? And he's like, look at where we are now. I'm really happy that it's worked out. He is one of the good dudes. I'm happy it has worked out. I think of the three guys, and this is going to be the start of setting Shawnee off. I think this is the best matchup for him of the three possible dance partners. And so I'm really happy that he's getting this opportunity. I know fighting in Brazil means a lot to him. The opportunity to win this title at home in Brazil means a lot to him. So really happy for him. And I hope it, for his sake, not from a pick standpoint, not from a rooting bias, but for him, I hope things work out for him on Saturday. It'd be a really cool story.
Indeed, very, very well said. And like Harry, I'm sure you feel the same as well. And we're going to have to check and see how many shots are left in the gun here now, lads, because there's after been a couple of shots thrown there already, or how many bullets left in the gun. I fucked that up. Shit, it's all good. Harry, look at with Glover. Like I said, it's his chance to kind of get back and cement his status as a quote unquote UFC legend. And on the other end of the stick, you know, it's a chance for Jamahal Hill to come in here and kind of state his claim and start a new era in the light heavyweight division. Overall, what's your thoughts, without getting too in depth into the actual fight itself, maybe just about maybe some of the foundations that have been laid before these guys get into the cage? What's your general thoughts on maybe Glover and what he may be facing on Saturday night, and some of the consequences that may result of this fight?
I think we know what he's facing, right? We've seen Jamahal Hill's best weapon is that left straight, or a left hook if he can find it, whatever it is. We know that there's the big power there. We know that he's got some athleticism in him. We know, we've seen that he's been able to use different setups to find the left hand. But I think for me, I do agree with Spencer to some aspect about Jamahal Hill being the nicest matchup for Glover. But look, we've also seen Jamahal Hill be in very close fights and then find a way to put guys out. We've seen him in fights where maybe he's getting the better of, and then he puts guys out. And so that sort of power, that sort of dynamism is something that has to be taken very, very, very seriously. And to the same vein, we talk a lot, or we've heard a lot from champions when they lose the title and they're climbing the mountain back. They say it's almost harder than the first time they do it, because they kind of know what it takes to get there. And there's not that blissful ignorance behind you. And for Jamahal Hill, I think this is the situation that ensued to get these guys into a title shot was kind of strange, and, you know, it was a bit weird. And now Jamahal Hill's kind of, in my opinion, got sort of a free pass here. He's going to Brazil. That's a hard place to go for any fighter, let alone when you're fighting somebody of the stature of Glover Teixeira at home. You're going to have all of those fans baying for blood. And if you lose, not only are you like, it's my first shot at a title, it's not like I can't get back there. It's, you know, I've had one loss previously. It's fine. We can get back on the horse, but you can also set all the other intangibles and all the other variables in his favor. And that may give him confidence, right? He may come in here and be like, fuck it. All I've got to do is land the left hand, because I know that if I land it, people go to sleep or people fall down and then I can put them to sleep. And so I think that he can come in here with a bag of confidence, because this to me is kind of like a free pass. I think the UFC sees Jamahal Hill similar to how Shawnee sees him, that one day it's likely that he holds that gold at some point. There are some things he needs to round out, fine. But I think we're seeing that with him, that weird draw, and then they're like, well, fuck it, he's the guy, right? Put him in, he's the guy.
Indeed. And look, at even hearing him talk before this kind of fight materialized, he had said he had already signed a new contract with the championship clause attached to it too. So that kind of piggybacks off what you were saying, Harry. Shawnee, I saved the best for last for you, because you were being a guy who has been keeping a close eye on Jamahal Hill, who had said from way back that he was going to be a UFC champion. My question for you on Jamahal is that, do you believe that he's going to have to produce the best performance that he's ever produced inside the octagon to get the job done on Saturday night? Or do you think performance similar enough to what we've seen against Thiago Santos in his last fight will be enough to kind of get him over the line and see him win that belt?
That's a good question, because I think the answer to that is probably no. And the reason I think that's interesting because after that last fight, I remember I tweeted and I said, right now, I think Jamahal Hill could be a UFC champion. And that's scary considering there's probably 4 or 5 years of improvement still left in him until he gets to his prime. I know he's 31 years of age, so he's not the youngest in the world, but at the higher weight classes, you know, people can go in later. And if he's still, you know, if he's starting to decline at 37 or 8, that's another 6-7 years to get to that point. So that's how good I think Jamahal Hill is, right? As a guy who's kind of still even a baby. I'm looking at his record, 11-1, 12 fights into his career for at the higher weight classes where guys go on for a long time and have a lot of fights. That is not a very experienced guy at all. And to look at a guy like that and think he has a skill set right now that, as Harry said, isn't fully developed yet, but is good enough to win, it is a scary thought. And, you know, I actually don't think he needs to produce the best performance of his career. If he does, I think he'll almost certainly win. Almost certainly win, because he is that good and that talented. And you look at a guy like him, and we don't often see him. Like I described him a couple of times this week as having like a swimmer's physique, and I think that'll benefit him here against Glover Teixeira, because I think he'll be able to kind of maybe stay away from Glover a little bit early and not maybe fall into some of the traps that Glover likes to put out there, like taking a couple of shots to maybe land a takedown or to land a big shot of his own. You know, most recently in his career, more so a takedown than the big shot. But I think if Jamahal is smart to that and moves away from him a little bit and performs very well in that fashion, I think he has a massive chance to win this fight. But like as Harry said, a lot of his fights recently have been, you know, and not maybe not recently, because the last fight was a more mature performance, and you kind of thinking after that one, God, if the improvements keep going the way they did for this one, it's going to be scary for any light heavyweight. But if he can land a big shot like Harry was talking about at any stage, even if he doesn't fight well, he could get Glover to share out of there. Glover is at the point I talked about with Jamahal that he might be at in 7 or 8 years, where, you know, even though he has done very well in what people would call the twilight of his career, you can only do so well for so long because, you know, you're getting older all the time. And he said straight away after the Yuri Prochazka fight, he's like, I'm an old man now. And this, even though it was a magnificent performance up until a certain point, Harry mightn't agree, but up until a certain point it was. But for Hill, I just think he is fantastic. He hits so hard, he moves so well, and he's getting better and better and better all the time. And he, you know, just last point to make, I was talking to someone about Yoel Romero today. We were actually talking about Ginki Sudo and looking at some of his old fights and looking at what an unbelievable athlete he was. You know, if you just look at the way he moves, obviously it was a long time ago and it mightn't be the same technique as MMA in 2013 or whatever, but I was talking about Yoel Romero then and how Yoel Romero moves. Like watching him in Ireland, I've never seen a human being move like that in my whole entire life. And it's usually that sort of athlete that we can really see in front of ourselves. RDA was another one like that, even to an extent McGregor or Junior Dos Santos, people like that who are kind of stronger, you know, power athletes. But it's actually rare we see an athlete, maybe John Jones is actually kind of one, but one like Jamahal Hill, who can move the way he does in such a fluid manner while still kind of learning the game and still dominating like that. And to see a guy like that in our sport is absolutely brilliant. And if he can keep adding to that, the technique of the beautiful 8 arts of MMA, he can do a lot.
Yeah, indeed. And I think it's very interesting for me looking outside in. Like the two main questions that I have coming in, Spencer, to this fight is it too much too soon for Jamahal Hill, or is it time for Glover Teixeira to kind of step away? Is it like he will have his say on it? He doesn't want it to be time, but sometimes you don't have a fucking say on it. Sometimes it just pops up upon you and it just happens. You know what I mean? And I think it's a case of we're going to find out if Jamahal Hill is ready, and we're going to find out possibly if Glover Teixeira's time has passed eventually. We've been waiting for so long. Even for him to get to the first title shot and to win the first title shot was amazing to me. Here he is again with another opportunity to do it in his home country. It would be a fantastic chapter to add on to his already storied book. About those particular questions though, how do you feel about them? Do you feel it may be too much too soon for Jamahal, or how long do you think Glover Teixeira can kind of ride out this success at the top of the light heavyweight division?
So the first one is the intriguing one to me because the honest answer is we don't know. And the only way to know is to see what happens Saturday. The thing I love about it is that that's the question Jamahal Hill has for himself and has been asking of himself every time he steps into the cage. Spoke to him before this fight, said, you know, that's been the thing you've been gunning for, is when I get there, am I going to be good enough to win a world title? What's it feel like to be here? And he was like, it just feels like this is where I'm supposed to be. Like, just feels like this is right. And maybe it doesn't work out, but if it doesn't, I go back, I adjust, and I come back. I said, kind of the same as, you know, taking lessons from Paul Craig. He said, yeah, exactly. That fight taught me a lot. Just play to my strengths. Don't try to do anything that I'm not. Look what's happened. We're going to find out if he's ready. I mean, he's at least close, right? There's no denying that he's close. The question I have about it, or sort of in terms of the progression, is I would have liked to have seen one more. I would have liked to have seen a win over Ankalaev or Błachowicz. I really would have liked the Anthony Smith fight that was originally on the table, even though I think Anthony Smith is sort of closer to Thiago Santos, who Hill has already beaten, than maybe that championship tier. But we're going to find out on Saturday. The part about Glover is so much harder to really speak to because, you know, historically speaking, in terms of evidence, he shouldn't still be this good at this age. There's not a lot of guys that do it for this long at this age, this successfully at this level. And the really difficult thing is that the cliff can just show up at any time. There doesn't have to be warning. He can roll in there on Saturday and suddenly look like a really old man. We don't know what that fight with Prochazka took out of him. We don't know how much all of a sudden, you know, that was the last best fight, the last great fight that he had in him. And then being in there, taking all that punishment, losing the way he did in the waning stages of a fight he was winning. We don't know if this is the moment that Father Time finally puts his hand on Glover Teixeira's shoulder and says, all right, old timer, you're coming with me. It could be. He could also just go out there and be like, yeah, not yet, man. I'm still here.
Like that clip, the clip that's going around this week on Twitter of when he fought Ian Kutalaba, and Kutalaba walked him down across the lane. He just looked him dead in the face and he said, "Not today, not today." And I think Harry Glover is going to have to do something similar to Father Time on Saturday night if he is to kind of get the job done. I mean, my assessment on kind of a brief assessment would be, I feel that if this gets into a battle of raw skills, that I kind of leaning towards Jamahal Hill in certain ways. But if this kind of gets into a battle of heart, I think we've seen what Glover is capable of and what he has in, and we haven't seen that much of Jamahal. Obviously, Jamahal got his arm damn broken and didn't barely even react it. So you know he wants to be in there. You know that stuff like that doesn't bother him. The fight, if it stays standing, will obviously lean towards Jamahal, I feel, with the power advantage and the speed advantage. If Glover can close the distance, although he is powerful still on the feet and did hurt Jiri in that fight, you would have to imagine if it does get into the grappling kind of stages, Glover will be kind of fancied to get the upper hand there. What I seen in both of these guys' last fight was Glover Teixeira's refusal to be beaten. And, you know, he kept coming back. And unfortunately for him, Jiri finally got his number in round 5. What we've seen in Jamahal Hill's last fight was he was so good in the striking department that he turned Thiago Santos into a wrestler. And Santos managed to get him down. And correct me if I'm wrong, I'm going to ask you to go into the technicalities of this fight now as well. But what I seen watching back that Santos fight was a very, very good performance from Hill, where, you know, he was asked a couple of questions and he refused to kind of lay down and he went on to get the win. But I did see some grappling exchanges where I felt, you know, where Thiago Santos could have taken advantage of those. And I feel that Glover will, if Jamahal finds himself in certain particular situations that he did find himself in that fight with Santos. Break down the technicalities of these two and how they match up, please, for me, Harry.
Sure. So you mentioned there are lots of invariables to this, right? There are lots of intangibles, there are lots of variables. And I think some of them lean towards Glover and some of them leads towards Jamahal. As we get higher in the weight classes, I think that power is sort of omnipresent. Those big guys all kind of carry power, and it's sort of who can get their power to the opponent quickest sometimes, but also the most intelligently, the most efficient way, because that mass is carried. When you're hitting and you're hitting hard and you're exploding into things, it's obviously going to tire anyone, but the bigger you are, the more tired you're going to get. And I think something that Jamahal Hill does really well is he's always looking for that left hand, but he's very intelligent with when he throws it, right? He throws it when he thinks he can see it, when it's almost certain to him in his mind that he can see it. So he tries to be as efficient with it as possible, whereas some fighters we see, they want a shot and they'll just throw it and throw it and throw it and throw it and throw it until it maybe lands. So I think that efficiency is positive for Jamahal Hill. I think the problem with that is that everyone knows that that's what he wants, right? And if you know that your fighter wants the left hand, there has to be tools, significantly dangerous tools added around that left hand. Look at Conor McGregor, right? You see all the spinning kicks, all the turning kicks, all the flying kicks, the jab, all of this stuff was legitimately dangerous, and dangerous enough that people had to respect it enough that the left hand was then there. And for Jamahal Hill, I think the same thing has to be answered. And we spoke about this just now with Shawnee, right? Like, these are the developments for him. And I think for Glover, the way to get around that left hand is twofold. One, you have to pressure him. Right? You have to pressure him with your footwork. You have to make sure your head's not on the center line. And you have to make sure that you're constantly cutting an angle to make Jamahal Hill question, is that left hand there? Or am I going to fall prey by overreaching, which we have seen him do a number of times, and allowing Glover to either counter me or just get to my hips, right? Jamahal Hill sometimes, and this is one of my only criticisms of him striking, is that he doesn't take his feet with him when he's throwing shots, and he leans a little when he's throwing shots. Now, he has the range with which to do that sometimes. He's very long in the arms, and he can often reach and touch his opponent. But I think for somebody like Glover, who has somebody of the caliber of Alex Pereira in his camp, Alex Pereira is going to look at Jamahal Hill and be like, left hand, bit of southpaw, bit of rangy movement, no stress. I'll see you tomorrow morning. And so the replication of that style of fighting is something that Alex Pereira is absolutely going to be able to show Glover. And how many times do you think that Glover's going to be shooting underneath Alex Pereira and taking him down? The answer is a lot, right? I suspect the answer is a lot. And if we look at skill for skill on a grappling realm, Thiago Santos doesn't hold a flame to Glover Teixeira. If anyone wants to go back over the archives of SevereMMA, listen to Sean and Graham talk over and over and over again about how underrated Glover Teixeira's wrestling and overall grappling game is. It's fantastic. And when he gets there, he's great. You mentioned about Hart for refusal to lose. I mean, in the Europa Hatchka fight, he also had a refusal to win, but that's not
true. That,
but like, I feel if he puts Jamahal Hill on his back, Jamahal is absolutely going to try to bounce back up. But the way he bounces back up often means he's posting on hands, which means that's available to be stripped, Dagestani handcuffed, and he can be wrist ridden for as long as he wants. But he has an ability to bounce. And I think when you have that ability to bounce, you don't really care about the technicalities of how you're getting up as much as you care about just getting up. And so Glover's going to be able to offer him some dilemmas of, are you going to give me your back? Are you going to give me access to a body lock when you get up? Are you going to give me access to a single leg? Am I going to put you immediately back on the fence? Where are your hands going to be? Am I going to give you some shots when you're getting up? And I feel like we could get into a bit of a tumble dryer situation, at least in the first couple of rounds. And if I was Glover, this is what I'd be trying to do. Pressure him, pressure him, pressure him, make him fight on the back foot a little bit. You may take a couple of jabs, you may take a couple of shots, but get to his hips and force him to be in a tumble dryer of consistently having to get back up and get back up and get back up. If a finish presents itself, grand. But let's see in the third round, when you've tired him out a little bit, taken a bit of the pop away from that left hand and made him a little bit more cognizant, more tactically aware of when to throw it because he doesn't want to overreach. He doesn't want to blow that gas tank out. And then let's see where the fight stands.
Yeah, very well put. And I mean, the two main points that I want to take from there is like, I think Jamahal Hill with all of his life has to make sure that Glover cannot close the distance here. One thing I worry about Jamahal Hill in this fight is his stance. He has a wide stance, which leaves him open for a leg kick. It also leaves him open for the single leg, and that's Glover's go-to to initiate the grappling exchanges. What Glover will do very smartly is he'll rhythm in his single leg behind a boxing combination. He'll grab that single leg, but it doesn't matter if you get that single leg, because that's going to force the turn and the push away, which will also give him the chance to secure back control, secure the clinch, and maybe take the fight down that way. I'm curious to see how Jamahal Hill combats that. How do you think he made combat that, John? Is it just simply drilling and working and putting and getting better since his last fight? Because, you know, the same way as what Harry said, Glover's going to expect the big left hand from Jamahal Hill. Jamahal is going to be expecting this single leg takedown too, or this entry into the single leg takedown. So if you're Jamahal Hill, we'll finish it up with this, because I know you fancy him to do it. How do you think he gets the job done on Saturday night?
Just 2 quick points on the first question you were asking there. It was funny. I think I was actually today. It was like the anniversary of McGregor versus Dennis Seaver, and I remember after that, a lot of people were talking about McGregor's wrestling and his jiu-jitsu in that. And they were saying, he's fighting Dennis Seaver. What the fuck are you talking about? You know? And then he goes out and like in fights, you know, he gets taken down by Chad Mendez, but he's able to get out. He's able to defend well. He does well at times against Nathan Diaz in jiu-jitsu. And he shows like in future fights that he is able to do that. Similarly enough, like what Harry's saying against Thiago Santos. Okay, Thiago Santos is not, you know, maybe you could call him, he's slightly above the Dennis Seaver level. But he stopped loads of takedowns from him. Thiago Santos constantly tried to grapple with him. He's not near the grappler of Glover Teixeira, but it's a good preparation for someone who's going to grapple him, you know, by having to, you know, fight anti that grappling for, what did it go, 4 into the 4th, 5th round for long periods of that fight. So that's the point I'd make to that. And on the second point, how I think he's going to win. Joe, what a phrase I hate, Harry used it there, and it's not that Harry used it, but I hate it in general. Intangibles, right? I fucking hate that phrase in MMA because it doesn't exist. And do you know why it doesn't exist? I'll give you an example. When there's no commentary in a fight, we still know what's happening. We still know what's happening. Intangibles are tangible in MMA. Heart is tangible in MMA. We fucking see it on their faces. We can see it all the time. We can see it in MMA. It's not like other sports. That's just a pet peeve of mine. But one thing that's very tangible, right, is a left hook, is a high kick, is a punch, whatever it might be. I'm watching Jamahal Hill, especially in the Thiago Santos fight. You look at a lot of his shots there, and you're kind of thinking, he's obviously working on that shot. Let me see what he's like at 6 months doing the same thing. Let me see what he's like in a year doing the same thing. And that's the sort of thing, like it's got to be hard to, you know, maybe you could call it an intangible here because you don't understand what it is on Saturday night because you've never seen it before, because he's never had it before, because he spent the last 3 months or whatever getting better with it. The 2 things I would look out for is the right hook and the left high kick, something he was obviously working on in the last fight. He caught Thiago Santos many times with the right hook, still didn't look perfect. I think it was in the 3rd round. He caught him on a lovely one, hit him really, really hard with it. And if one of those weapons is now a real weapon, it's going to be very hard for Glover Teixeira to, 1, prepare for it, and 2, deal with it. Because everything else he brings is so dangerous as well. Like, he is by no means the finished article. You can pick out more bad things than good things with Jamahal Hill almost in some of his fights, and yet he's still, you know, undefeated apart from a brilliant broken arm, a brilliant armbar by Paul Craig, who, you know, maybe we'll get another shot at him if he wins on Saturday night. And that, to me, is a massive thing coming in here. A thing we can't analyze because we've never seen it yet that he could produce. And when you'll only get that with a guy 12 fights into his career or you know, or less around that.
Yeah, indeed. I think real quick, Harry, because we need to move on here.
Just on the intangibles thing, what I mean by intangibles is things that you can't measure out of the fight. Like, how's he going to deal with being in Brazil in front of that crowd? How's he going to deal with the weather? How's he going to deal with the altitude change? How's he going to, like, these are things we can't measure right now, and we can assume on them, but because they aren't tangible right now, that's why I call them intangibles. But I agree with what Shawnee's saying. In the fight, there's very few things that we can call intangibles. Absolutely.
Indeed, indeed. Look, we may not be too familiar for coming in knowing what's going to happen in the main event, but we definitely know what's going to happen in the co-main event because we've seen it 3 times already. And that's, Spencer, it's going to be an absolute fucking barn burner again, without a doubt. There's not too often that you can sit down and talk about a fight and absolutely guarantee entertainment, but we did it before the first fight, we did it before the second fight, and now we did it before the third, and now we're going to do it for the 4th time here. It's great to see this kind of rivalry flourish at the same time as watching these 2 fighters flourish at the same time as well. Like when we think back to the first time that these 2 guys fought, Deiveson Figueiredo was coming off his title win against Alex Perez, I believe.
Yep.
And, you know, he was only slowly starting to develop himself into this kind of phenom flyweight. Brandon Moreno before that fight was coming in, obviously a short notice fight that was probably in the works in the background, depending on how Figueiredo got on against Perez. But Brandon Moreno came into that fight with, you know, a second opportunity, a redemption story after being cut from the UFC, coming back, putting the run together to get himself into that position. But it just seems that these 2 fighters have grown inside the cage against one another. And it's been absolutely fascinating to watch in front of our eyes. And now we have them coming in and fighting for the 4th time. What can we expect here? Because it's kind of like we've seen everything before with this. And I can almost guarantee entertainment. But this is a fight where, honestly, I'm flipping over and back. I've definitely changed my mind. My official pick right now, I think, is Moreno is in. That's probably going to change, and it might even change again before the fight even happens. But this is a fantastic, like one of the best trilogies that you'll ever see in the history of the UFC, in my opinion, in my humble opinion. 2 fantastically skilled fighters. We're going to write the final chapter again on Saturday night in the 4th fight between Deiveson Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno. Give us your thoughts, please.
I mean, I want to do the obvious. Will it be the final chapter? Can we say for sure?
We definitely cannot, but
I mean, it'd be great if there were, you know, a no contest, and then they're 1, 1, 1, and 1. We get all of them covered. We get all the potential results covered. That one goes out to my guy Sean Madden, who hit me with that when we were talking about this fight. I mean, as you said, all of them have been entertaining. All of them have been exciting one way or another. That includes the second fight where I felt Brandon Moreno absolutely dominated. Seeing him dominate was entertaining. And that's the real hook to this, to me. I'm pretty certain that I know what I'm going to get from Brandon Moreno. He's going to move well, very well-rounded, looked great against Kai Kara France. You know what he's going to be. You're guaranteed that if it gets to round 5, that dude's still going to have plenty of gas to get after it. The real question is Figueiredo, right? Because the first fight, dude dominated that fight. It was a draw because he lost a point for accidentally kicking Brandon Moreno in the pills like 3 different times. Otherwise, he wins the belt and we're not here. We don't get any of this. We don't get immediate rematch and then a third and then now 4th. But the second fight, he turned up like a guy that was just happy to be there and was like, I don't really care about this anymore. You can have my belt. And so then going into the third, you think, all right, this guy doesn't really, and he looked great in that third fight. Came out, I thought he won the fight, clearly won the fight. Competitive fight, close fight, good fight, but I thought he won it clearly. And now it's like, well, okay, which dude is showing up? Who are we getting? Does being in Brazil motivate him, get him more pumped up? I know Guilherme Cruz from MMA Fighting talked to him today, and he said he's got like 4 pounds to cut, cut that Friday morning. So that all sounds not bad. Sounds pretty good, all things considered.
Sounds like lies.
Could very well be fabrications.
100% lies.
Could very well be lies. Could very well turn up at 129 on Friday morning, and
I don't know where he's going to fucking shed it either.
We're in a weird situation, but he's the question mark, right? He's the deciding factor in this, because I know what I'm going to get from Moreno, and if he is locked in, this is automatically in the running for fight of the year before it happens, because that's what these 2 dudes are capable of. Deiveson Figueiredo has crazy power for this division. He goes hunting. He hurts everybody he fights. He's put Brandon Moreno on the deck in the past, can certainly do it again. And Brandon Moreno has looked good. He's finished him. And he finished Kai Kara France looking great with a precise shot to the guts. If this was the main event, if the light heavyweight title didn't get added, I would still be a happy camper because I love this fight.
Absolutely, as would I. And I mean, I think you kind of defined it quite rightly, and it's how I'm thinking about this fight as well. That the big questions around me are around Deiveson Figueiredo. I believe that if he has enough in the tank to get through the 5 rounds, and we did see that in the last fight between the two, he has the more impactful looking strikes, and he did seem to have that throughout that last contest. And I think that's going to be a big defining factor, Harry, in this fight, is who gets off the more powerful shots, because it's so nip and tuck between the two guys' skill set. For me, with Deiveson Figueiredo, and Spencer touched on it, he's a guy who I feel always fights and worries about his gas tank, and that we don't get to see his true self in there. And I think that he tried to do that in the very first fight, and it cost him, although he was 3 weeks out from fighting before. And I thought it was ridiculous to have him cut weight twice in 3 weeks for a fight. That didn't help. But it seemed that everything came into place for him in the last fight. And it just needs to be for him maybe picking up where you left off. But even in that win as well, I feel if he had the confidence in his gas tank, is that he might even have the capabilities of getting Moreno out of there. But he knows what he is. He knows that he has to make a big cut, and that gas tank does take away from some of his abilities. And it's crazy to see him looking as good as he has looked, considering he is cutting so much weight and getting down there. What's your overall assessment on these two guys? You've had plenty of tape to watch back. I'm sure you've done plenty of analysis. Break down how you see the 4th fight going. Are you expecting to see something different again in this fight? Are you expecting to see, has there been a pattern forming as these fights have progressed down the line?
My answer is I've watched the fights and I haven't got a fucking clue what's going to happen. Like, I honestly don't. I watched them, and I've watched the fights many times, right? I've watched them from Brandon Moreno's perspective, purely watching him. What's he doing? How's he reacting? How's he taking shots? How's he landing shots? All this stuff. I've watched them from Deiveson Figueiredo's perspective. I've tried to watch them as a whole fight. And I'm like, fuck me, lads. I don't know what's going to happen. Like, you know what? What we know is what you've already kind of said, right? Deiveson Figueiredo is 35 years of age. He's got a mad cut to make. He's 24 fights deep into his MMA career. Does that take a toll on him, right? Does the stress of being in Brazil and having everyone expecting you to win and everything, does that play a factor? I don't know. But the thing for Deiveson Figueiredo is economy, right? The whole fight is about economy, because we look at Chito Vera, and I'm not comparing the two, but all Deiveson needs to do is land 5 massive shots in the whole fight and he wins, right? He needs to find those shots, and he needs to make sure that when he throws, he's pretty certain he's going to land. We talked about that with Jamahal Hill, and we talked about that sort of being a technical deficiency thing, and sort of being tactically aware of everything else that's coming back for him. But for Deiveson Figueiredo, I think you're absolutely right. What we probably should do, purely for Deiveson Figueiredo, is make 3 2-minute rounds and be like, go on, boys, off you go, with like a 6-minute break in between them, right? No stress. Let him go out there and just let him throw absolute balls to the wall for 2 minutes, 3 times. And it would be amazing. But Shawnee once said something that I just can't unhear. And it's that Deiveson fights like Francis Ngannou at flyweight. You know what happens with Francis if he tried to fight like a flyweight? He'd gas immediately. And I think that's the key for Brandon Moreno, right? The Brandon Moreno is you have to set a pace. You absolutely have to set a pace, because we know that in the 5th round, that pace may drop by 10%, but Deiveson's dropped 75% if he's forced to keep up that pace. And we know for Brandon Moreno that you're going to have to take shots. You are absolutely going to have to eat shots if you're going to put a pace on Deiveson Figueiredo.
You would think, Harry, coming in here, that, you know, Moreno, which he has been guilty of doing in maybe the last couple of fights, is spending a little bit too long just trying to trade off with Deiveson on the feet, where is what he started off doing so well in the last fight was initiating that clinch, was creating scrambles as well, which are all energy draining movements and stuff like that. I feel that if he can do that throughout this fight, it will make it a hell of a lot more easier. It will drain the tank of Deiveson Figueiredo, and it will kind of lighten his more impactful shots towards the end of the fight as well. It kind of we could be looking at this as a two-part fight per se, with Deiveson starting off strong and Moreno maybe coming back into it too, even if it does get that far. But excuse me for interrupting. I'll just let you finish before I hand it over to Shawnee.
So there's like there's a concept in chess, right? And I hate the analysis between chess and fighting, but like there's a concept in chess of equal trading, right? And equal trading is when you take two pieces off the board that are equal in their value. There's no equal trading with Deiveson Figueiredo, right? Because you might land 3 shots, but he might break your fucking jaw. And I think if I'm Brandon Moreno, I need to be active enough that Deiveson has to throw shots in combinations or during my combinations that he can't sit down on. And that's an extremely difficult task to do, because Deiveson's footwork is great. He's very economical with his movement. And as you're coming in, he's already going to be trying to sit down on punches. So I think if I'm Moreno, I might do the opposite of what everyone has been taught to do, which is you throw shots and then you shoot. I might be looking to fake shots, shoot, and then as Deiveson is stopping my takedown, break and either go to clinches and dirty box, or as I'm breaking, throw my combinations. Because as you said, if we can create scrambles here and consistently create scrambles from clinches and all of these sorts of positions, then we're favoring Brandon Moreno highly, because Deiveson has to explode out of these things. He has to match the pace. Otherwise, he'll lose the scramble. Deiveson has to try and keep this in his wheelhouse. And that's what we saw in the third fight. In the second fight, we saw Brandon Moreno take it into his realm, right? And I have absolutely no idea how this plays out.
Shawnee, you feel that Deiveson Figueiredo is going to find the king early in this fight, and it could be checkmate early days, given your prediction of how this fight is going to go. And that being said, to maybe simplify it, I wanted to use that because Harry brought in the word chess. You think Deiveson's going to get Moreno and catch him early, and this fight is going to be over before it even begins, really? What makes you so confident in that kind of pick and the way how you see that fight going?
I think Figueiredo tried to play chess in the last fight. I think he needs to play checkers in this fight, to be honest. He needs to simplify it. Like, if you think about it, right, we have had 4 fights now. But think about what the analysis would have been coming into the first fight. It would have been Figueiredo is this absolute barnstormer of a fighter who absolutely decimated Joseph Benavidez in 4 minutes or whatever it was. Moreno's a good fighter who can take a punch, who can keep going, who's a good gas tank. That's kind of what they still are if they fight to what we would perceive them to be at their best. I like Harry was saying about putting the pace on earlier, right? And I think the way that Brandon Moreno wins this fight if he puts on a high pace. I think the way Figueiredo wins this fight if he puts on a high pace, right? One of those paces from Figueiredo, namely, has to work early, and one of them has to work late. You know, we're talking judging about impactful strikes, and then you say, oh, well, what about the ones that are immediately impactful strikes, and what about the ones that don't immediately impact you? Well, those are the sort of strikes that Brandon Moreno lands, right? That will impact the fight in rounds 3, 4, and 5. And you know what? The strikes, the immediately impactful strikes that Figueiredo lands in 1 and 2 will impact you as well in 3, 4, and 5. But they won't be impacting Brandon Moreno. They'll be impacting Deiveson Figueiredo, because the effort he put into throwing those big bombs will make him tired, and Brandon Moreno will keep coming. Like the issue here for Deiveson Figueiredo, as we've seen down through the years in many, many different combat sports, is he's met a guy who can take his shots. He's met a guy who can take absolute bombs and keep coming. And you have 2 options in that scenario. You can get in a fucking atomic bomb and absolutely drop it right down his fucking head and say, you're not taking this. Or you can do what he did in the last one, and you can snipe him, you can touch him, you can wait out until the very end and try to barely win it. I don't think he's going to do that again. That's my opinion. That's why I've picked what was my pick? The first round for Deiveson Figueiredo. That's why I've gone for that. I think he's going to pick a little bit differently, right? Spencer spoke about the weight cut there. I don't believe for a second it's 4 pounds, but I believe it will be better because he's had a year off. It's in Brazil. It's just going to be a little bit easier for him. He's had a lot more time to get down and make the weight and to make it healthier. Now, if it is 4 pounds, that's actually probably an issue. He's probably there too early. He's probably absolutely drained himself for too much of his camp, and that could be a problem. So, for himself, I hope that's not true. But if he has done it more healthily and can keep going and can, not just can he keep going, but he has confidence in his ability to keep going. So what Deiveson Figueiredo needs is 2 rounds of all-out aggression with the confidence in his brain that he can win rounds 3, 4, and 5 as well. But putting the effort out there to only win it in the first 2 rounds, in my opinion, that's the best way for him to win this fight in a more comprehensive way. Look, he can go out and he can do what he did the last day. Like, that fight wasn't that good, to be honest. I went back and watched it. It was a good fight. It was a good technical fight, but it felt like it could have been a lot better of a technical fight if Figueiredo kind of did a little bit more, even if you're not fighting the all-out aggressive style. He just didn't do enough to make it as good a fight as all the previous ones, which were obviously very, very good fights. I can't see him fighting that same fight again, even though it was a winning fight for him, even though it was a winning fight. The only thing I can see similarly is maybe he fights a similar fight with a little bit extra output. And if he does that, I think Brandon Moreno will find it easier, I think, to adjust. As Harry was saying, land, more shots, be more aggressive. And if he is, like, if Figueiredo only decides to up the aggression a little bit, I think that will play into Brandon Moreno's hands. I really, really do. And I don't think there's idiots out there in his camp. He's with, so who does an idiot in a certain way, but he's not an idiot when it comes to fighting and when it comes to game planning. I'm sure there's other people there as well. And I think they'll have recognized that. I don't think it's a real hard one to come up with that one, and if he comes at him guns a-blazing and is prepared really, really well, we could have an absolute firefight here early. We really could. That's my prediction for it. Well, like, I really, really, I had to go back to where I was before the quadrilogy, and I believe in Deiveson Figueiredo. Like the Francis Ngannou comparison, I believe in his ability to land those big shots, and if he believes in those ability to land those shots again, I think he can get it done.
Yeah, very well said. Very well said. I'm always interested to see, with Moreno moving camps as well. There's a fresh set of eyes, there's a fresh set of tactics coming in on this fight as well. So, that adds an extra little wrinkle into an already fascinating fight.
Where'd he go? What camp did he go to?
He left Glory MMA and he is now currently with it's still listed as Glory on Tapology, so I can't see. Do you know, Spencer?
So he's moved back to Vegas, right? So before he moved to Glory, he had bought a house in Las Vegas. He's managed by Jason House of Iridium Sports Agency. He bought a house in Vegas, moved to Vegas, and at that time was still with the guys from Entrim, but had brought a bunch of his crew sort of with him to Vegas. I think his situation now is actually fairly similar. He's always had kind of training partners with him and around him, Marcelo Hoyo, guys like that. And so I think it's back to maybe not necessarily the main guys from Entrim that he worked with on his way up, but he's always sort of had guys around that he would work with. And so I don't think he's got a specific, I'm representing team XYZ, but he's got his guys around him and he'll be ready to go.
He wasn't with Crows for that long either, was he? He was on there for
it was one fight.
No, that was it. Just one fight.
Yeah.
It says he's put out something here saying that he's with Say Saud for this one. Yeah,
I mean,
that's a good man to have in your corner. He's
very good man.
It depends. I mean, I don't think he was going to Dallas, and I don't know that Safe was in Vegas the whole time. But yeah, I mean, listen, you can do worse than the general.
And I didn't bring it up as a negative. I actually brought it up as a positive, whereas, like, getting another perspective could be good for him. And it might bring in a little bit of a notch in a game plan, or maybe somebody like Safe might see something that someone else might not see. But what we will see in the welterweight division in the next fight is Gilbert Burns taking on Neil Magny. Gilbert Burns, Spencer, we'll stick with you. trying to forge his path into title contention again, coming off the fight of the year, lost to Hamza Chimaev last time, took a long time off, and I think rightly so after a fight of that kind of caliber where there was a lot of damage landed and it was very grueling. He's coming in here against, just a legend in Neil Magny, who just doesn't turn down fights. He's worked himself yet again into a fight of this caliber against the top 5 opponent, and deservedly so. I mean, you've waxed lyrical about Neil Magny time and time again. Me personally, I think this is a fight is probably going to be a little bit too much for him. I cannot see Neil Magny lasting 3 rounds against Gilbert Burns, unfortunately. What's your opinion and assessment?
Yeah, exactly that, and sort of whatever Harry's face translates to there. I got a feeling this is a little bit of reminding everybody how good Gilbert Burns is, and that, as Frankie Edgar famously said at UFC 211, there are levels to this. I think this is a dominant performance for Gilbert Burns. The time off thing, part of that is that no one wanted to fight this dude. Like, he wanted to fight. He actively trying very hard to get Jorge Masvidal to sign on the dotted line, and Street Jesus wanted no part of it. And so I think this is a little bit like, if I'm Gilbert Burns and I'm coming off my last 3 fights are a championship fight where I put Kamaru Usman on the deck. Yes, I lost, but I knocked him down. A dominant win over Stephen Thompson, and a hell of a fight against Hamzat Chimaev. And the guy I end up with is Neil Magny. With all respect and love for Neil Magny, I'm going out and being like, yeah, we're not doing this anymore. We're not fighting guys that are this far behind me in the pecking order anymore. Sure, Neil Magny looked good, got a win over Daniel Rodriguez last time out, but we saw earlier in the year that he couldn't hang with Shavkat Rakhmonov. And so I got a feeling that this is Gilbert Burns coming out and being like, listen, boys, I want to remind everybody in this division that you don't really want these problems. And I think Neil Magny is going to leave that fight not wanting those problems anymore.
Indeed. I don't think there's too much else to add on to that fight. I think Spencer explained it perfectly well, and I'm exactly in the same line of thinking as you as well. Harry, I'll move over to you for the next fight in the women's flyweight division. That's Jessica Andrade against Lauren Murphy. Interesting fight here. I mean, 2 very durable women. Jessica Andrade obviously looking to try and get back up in there. I'm thinking, obviously, Valentina Shevchenko at the time of this recording is now matched up. She's matched up with Talia Santos.
No,
is that correct? No.
Not officially signed to fight Alexa Grasso.
Grasso, yeah.
Right. So,
it's rumored it's moving towards the end zone, but it's not officially there yet.
I see.
And that's from the Shevchenko camp.
Some inside information there from ESK there. Love it. But I guess my point in saying that was that I feel that this may be Shevchenko's last title defense at 125 pounds before she moves up to the 135 pound division. We've talked about it on the year in review and stuff, is that we may see a little bit of shuffling around in all the women's divisions this year. And I welcome that too, because it makes fights like Jessica Andrade and Lauren Murphy a little bit more interesting if there is a kind of a new challenge, a new goal, or a vacant title at the top of the division here as well. And I think that's the mindset that both of these women should be bringing into this fight here. And if they do, we should be in for a hell of a contest, Harry.
I couldn't agree more now. I think my base analysis here is that Lauren Murphy eats a lot of shots and Jessica Andrade throws a lot of power. I think that the route for me for Lauren Murphy is, she's not the quickest of fighters, but she's very gritty. She's very durable, and she's happy to make it that gritty, durable, dirty, horrible, grindy type of fight. And I think that's what you need to do against Jessica Andrade, right? You need to push her against the fence. You need to grind her out. You need to get your underhooks and drag her to the mat if you can, and then punch her up a little bit and sit in her half guard and make her try and fight for frames and make her do all of that grindy type stuff. Jessica is a woman who, when she's dialed in and when she's on, she's a serious problem. I mean, you don't finish a standing head and arm triangle unless you've got an insane squeeze. The only one I remember was Jan Blachowicz and Devin Clark, and that was wild even then. That was a throwback. You all had to fucking remember that one, didn't you? I
was doing was it an arm triangle or was it a essentially a bulldog choke? But yeah, that was a while back.
Yeah, it could have been a bulldog choke. Now you say, and I'll just shit on my own fucking historical knowledge. But to me, Andrade has all of the athletic capabilities to go out there and make this a bloodbath. And I think 3 rounds favors Andrade as well. If this is a 5-round fight and Lauren Murphy can drag it into the depths of that third and Andrade hasn't got too much left and there's 2 rounds for Lauren Murphy to go out there and do things, fine. But I don't know. I feel like I'm leaning very heavily towards Andrade here. Quicker footwork, better patterns, hits really hard, and Lauren Murphy is there to be hit. It's somebody can prove me wrong if they want.
Well, no, I think the only person that can prove you wrong is Lauren Murphy on Saturday night if she goes in and does it. But I definitely agree with your assessment. But I do feel with Lauren Murphy, she has the case of the Rocky Penningtons about her, where she's not the most technically advanced. Sometimes she goes in there and she's not the most skilled in a fight, but she has an ability to make it competitive at the same time. And it's just as we talk about time and time again, it's knowing who you are as a fighter and being comfortable with that and not having an ego or a chip on your shoulder to think that you're going to go in there and maybe win a striking contest with Jessica Andrade or maybe out grapple her or whatnot. Lauren Murphy has always had to find ways to win inside the octagon, and she's going to have to do it again, Spencer, on Saturday night.
She looked crazy good against Miesha Tate. Crazy good against Miesha Tate. And now look, Miesha Tate going down to 25 for the first time. Older, third fight back, all of those things, fine. Certainly not Jessica Andrade. If some of those improvements from her first time working with the crew that she's working with are real and have taken root, this is even more interesting to me. I think everything that Harry said is 100% correct, and this could get very ugly very quickly. But if those adjustments and those improvements and sort of even some of the personal pieces of it, of believing in those things, have really settled in for her, this can be interesting because there will be that grit difference. There will be that you can hit me with your best shot and I'm going to take it. And then what? And then what? Then what do you do? And that's a thing we haven't really seen that much for Jessica Andrade. Normally she hits people with the best shot and they fall over or they grab their midsection because she's busting ribs. What happens if she lands one and Lauren Murphy's like, yep, that hurt. Do you have any more? This could be super interesting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Shawnee, I'm going to go to you next for the opening fight on the main card. And that's a little bit of a Four Nations clash here, and technically, really, isn't it? Sean Paul Craig versus Johnny Walker, Shawley Shooter, as we like to call him, Ireland's own. In the light heavyweight division. Obviously, look at with everything that's happened at the top of the main card, we have a little bit of light heavyweight interest at the start of the card as well. And this is kind of an interesting stylistic matchup, really, because to simplify it, we know what Paul Craig wants to do. He wants to take thunderous shots en route to securing a triangle submission, whereas Johnny Walker likes to go out there and try and fight technically before he gets hit into the face and turns into a wild man. Is that kind of what you're going to expect to be seeing here in the opening fight on the main card on Saturday night?
Yeah, exactly that. Johnny Walker is a wild man, kind of in hiding, a little bit. He's like, right, I'm going to fight technical. No, hold on, wait. Paul Craig both needs to draw that out of him and needs to avoid it at the exact same time. But that's what Paul Craig is. That is exactly what Paul Craig is. So, look, I don't think that Paul Craig will be able to get through the madness of Johnny Walker. Like, if you pull guard against Johnny Walker, he is just too big and strong and powerful. And I don't think he can beat him on the feet. Now, having said that, Paul Craig can hit. At times, he's hit guys in the past. He kind of catches people unawares as well because you think, this lad's just going to pull guard or he's just going to try to fucking fly an armbar me or something like that. And he does hit lads. And Johnny Walker, Johnny Walker's not Brandon Moreno. Let's put it like that. He's not going to take shots all night if he lands a lot. Like if Paul Craig is able to land, I could see him knocking him out. But look, the call here is probably Johnny Walker early with a big knockout from ground and pound more than likely. But Paul Craig, he's so dangerous. Never rule Paul Craig out. Never rule Paul Craig out. But like, there's too many times where Paul Craig either like pulls guard and gets hammer fisted, and it's one of those knockouts where like he takes too many shots, or he gets knocked out, wakes back up, and then he's like, hold on, am I still in the fight? And the referee's like, hold on, is he still in the fight? And then we keep going. Like, that's not going to happen against Johnny Walker, I don't think. Also, before I throw it back to you, Gilbert Burns, Neil Magny, Jessica Andrade, Lauren Murphy are the exact same fight. It's just the exact same fight to do with him. So
yeah, very, very good assessment there. And we'll move on to the next fight, which is sadly not the exact same fights as we were talking about. And that's the apparent retirement fight. And I say apparent with inverted commas of
come on,
Shogun.
Come on,
Shogun.
next one.
Next one.
Look, I'm going to be candid here. My introduction into MMA came through watching Chuck Liddell, watching all of the light heavyweights. And then I set eyes on Shogun Rua on his Pride run back in the day. I got not to see it live, but you get to see DVDs and old videotapes back of it. And his rise up through the Pride Fighting Championships was unbelievable. It was almost movie-like. He was one of the best fighters in the world at a given time way back in the day, knocking out all comers. Came to the UFC after a couple of knee injuries. I don't think we got to see him fully in his prime in the UFC, but we did get to see the magic of the Lyoto Machida fights. Obviously that close one where Jesus, if you were into judging back in the day there, I remember that being a very big judging controversy back in the day. Lyoto Machida and Shogun won. Yeah, the
Horrible
second
scorecard.
Yeah, the second time he didn't leave it to the judges, which was great to see, and it was brilliant for me to see him. I think it would have been a shame for Shogun not to come in or to come into the UFC and not win the championship. But we're at the sad reality of the situation right now, where he's coming towards the end of his career. He probably should not be fighting anymore, and that's the reality of the situation. He's looking for a fairy tale ending. Is he going to get it, Spencer? I'm not too sure. I can't. Like, I mean, for me, my heart broke when he was forced to tap out the strikes to Paul Craig, and that was it. Paul Craig in that fight, or
yeah.
else, yeah. And I mean, it was just for a guy who was this samurai-like warrior in Pride, to see him kind of fall into that, which happens to so many fighters, not just Shogun. But the old dream could turn into a nightmare real quick on Saturday night when he steps in to take on Iyar Potieria in the light heavyweight division, Spencer.
Yeah, it's going to be wonderful to see him get the ovation on the way out and get the roar and support and all the everybody behind him that he deserves. He is an absolute legend. As you said, his best days were before anybody that just saw him in the UFC ever got to see. I'm sure there are footballers that, have come over to MLS that fit that bill. I talked about it on 10 Things. From a perspective of basketball, Arvydas Sabonis, legend in international basketball, finally hits the NBA after he's had myriad Achilles and knee injuries, and people are still like, Jesus, this guy's really good. That was Shogun in the UFC. Still really good, but Pride Shogun was blow you out of the water. I mean, the fact that we're even sitting here and wondering whether it's going to be good or bad, and he's facing Iyar Potieria, tells you everything you need to know. I think he can win. It's not like Iyar Potieria is a world beater by any stretch. 0-1 in the UFC. Didn't look good in that fight at all, losing to Nick Negumereanu. But like, Shogun's 41 and the knees are gone, and he hasn't won a fight in 3 years, 4 years. I mean, gonna be a lovely moment as he walks out. Could be a real sad moment as he then exits the cage. I hope, same as I said with Glover Teixeira in the main event, for that person, I hope he wins so that we get a glorious send-off. He gets to say thank you, leaves the octagon, and there's no, I still really would like to get one more, but I don't know that happens.
Yeah, like, I mean, that kind of scenario maybe might lead him to saying, maybe if he gets to win, maybe I have one more in me. Maybe I have one more. The sad reality of the situation, I know, I know that, and I hope it doesn't happen. I hope he gets to win and rides off into the sunset. But sometimes you just need to kind of get that. You kind of need to get chucked or dealt until you really realize that it's all over. You know what I mean? And that's getting devastatingly knocked out time and time again, or getting finished. But we'll see what happens. Anybody else have anything to say about Shogun Rua? I'd like to talk about one or two fights before we wrap it up. I mean, what are we thinking heading into this fight? Or any good memories of Shogun Rua? It'd be nice to maybe talk about for a couple of minutes. If this is the last time we're going to see him inside the octagon, Sean.
Hua. Yeah, like he's not into, like, he's not exactly fucking getting Frankie Edgar here. He lost split decision to OSP last time. And okay, that Paul Craig one, which was a rematch of a draw before that. Like, he beat Tyson Pedro, he beat Little Nog as well before that. And okay, before that, you know, he was on a 3-fight win streak before the Anthony Smith fight as well. And yeah, you know, he's not exactly a guy. He's taken his licks, absolutely. He's at a later stage of his career, absolutely. As we said, look, he came into the UFC. He was the champion in the UFC. He was, you know, it wasn't like he underachieved or anything. He was an absolute great fighter. Like, he's one of those guys you watch back on the old days of him, and you just see, like, he was probably one of the last kind of berserkers, while moving on to be like a really talented fighter, but like could never have become the level that maybe like the guys today have become, because there's just too much wear and tear on the clock. Like, you look at Glover, and we talked about, you know, Glover kind of being locked out of the UFC for a while, and you know how much of that is the reason Glover's still able to fight at this age and still able to keep going. Like, Shogun is surprisingly only 41. Like, Shogun has been, it feels like he's been around for so long, and like, I don't know, I like, just a legend of the fight game, a guy. Like, I what I love to look at Shogun, you know, we used to do the career retrospectives before, and maybe Shogun be a good guy for it, but just look at some of the names that he's fought: Dan Henderson, Chael Sonnen, Alexander Gustafsson, John Jones, Forrest Griffin, Lyoto Machida, Chuck Liddell, Mark Coleman, Alistair Overeem, Kevin Randleman, Little Nog a couple of times, Rampage Jackson, and we can go on. Babalu. Those names that he has fought down through the years have been absolutely insane. Like, to start out, he's got Ricardo Arona as well, was an absolute monster of a fighter. I was watching a few of his fights again recently. Like, to start off his career with his first 12 fights, he only lost one of them to Babalu. Like, that was an unbelievable way to go for a guy who came in so young as well. An absolute legend of the sport. And, you know, in the last couple of weeks, I suppose, there's been a lot of talk about how we need to show extra respect to the legends of sport and not forget them and not let them go. And, you know, we've tried to do that with the Contender. We've tried to do that with some of the Speakers' Corners and other things as well. And I really think that is a massive thing, that we can't forget these guys. We need to keep talking about them and keep talking about these old fights and keep, you know, respecting our history. And if you don't respect Shogun Rua, you don't respect the history of MMA.
Indeed, very, very well said. I had the pleasure of being at that second Mark Coleman fight in Dublin. I believe it was UFC 90 or something in around those
93,
lines.
wasn't it?
93, I believe, yeah. Great to see him live. Obviously didn't perform all that well on the night, but you know, it's always nice to see a legend perform in live action as well. So, and you know, you mentioned Jamahal Hill and his biker body, his kind of cyclist body, Sean. I think Shogun Rua is the OG cyclist body in there, maybe. When
I think he had a corner back body more.
He did. That's only a joke me and you were going to get. But what there's going to be no joking in the next heavyweight fight that I want to talk about, and that's about our guy Jailton Almeida, who will take on Shamil Abdurrahimov in the heavyweight division. I nailed it. I couldn't have another Nurmagomedov moment there, not like last week. But look at Harry. This is Jailton Almeida's time, man. You know what I mean? We've seen him in there. We've seen him in dominating performances. We've seen him fight lesser competition. Well, this is a good test for him in Shamil. And it'll be very, very interesting to see if he can out-grapple this gentleman. What I would love to see is for him not to be able to grapple him, so that we can kind of see other facets of his game as well. Are you looking forward to seeing Almeida get in there? Like a guy who probably could be fighting in the 205-pound division if we're being real, but as you say, Harry, fuck weight cutting, and he's probably going to give it a go in the heavyweight division until it doesn't work out. But for what we've seen so far, it's been working out quite very well for him. Are you excited at his prospect of maybe coming into the heavyweight rankings, or do you think he has a big future or a big ceiling?
I very much do. I very, very much do. Yeah. I mean, with a guy that can grapple like he can, and he's a heavyweight, right? He's got big power. It's fine. I think this is a really interesting test for him, because Shammy just doesn't go away, right? You have to actually put him away. And he's somebody that has got heavy hands, but he's slow, he's stiff. He's a guy that knows how to do a bit of the grappling himself. He can do some of the anti-grappling. I think this is the perfect test at the perfect time. But I'm not somebody, as you know, that vies for weight cutting or anything like that. But I feel like he actually does more damage in the light heavyweight division than he does in the heavyweight division. I think as he moves up those rankings, I think that the narrow focus of grappling is going to cause problems. Whereas at light heavyweight, I think that it can be implemented in a far easier fashion. But yeah, I think he probably runs through Shammy in probably the first round. I don't think there's much that Shammy's going to offer Jelton here. Too athletic, too powerful, too much of a bulldozer. Shawnee was talking about Yoel Romero. And I mean, when you watch Jelton Almeida sprint across a cage and drive his shoulder through the solar plexus of another human, I'm like, fuck me, is this cage going to hold him or what? Like, he's a big man with big power and big athleticism. And I just don't think Shammy has anything for him.
Yeah, good assessment. I'm looking at his nickname here. It's Malhaldino. He was called a Brazilian Habib at one stage, wasn't he? Or is that somebody else? Is that Sean? Am I right in that, Sean?
No, it was him, wasn't it? I think the commentary just kind of called him that more than I think it's maybe. But that was him. I'm pretty sure it was him. Yeah, I think this is an interesting one though, just based on size alone. Because Jailton, like, I don't think he'd be weighing over, let's say, 225, 230. And Shammy is a guy who's maybe not hitting the limit, but only maybe 10 pounds off of it. If he can stop the takedown, or even like get Jailton to push him against the cage for a round and a half and or something like that, it can maybe expose a different part of his game, whether good or bad, for Jailton. Like, this is a fight. My flyer of the week this week over in Sherdog for this to go to decision is plus 875, which is a massive price. And I don't necessarily think it will. I think, Harry's call is probably closer than it's going to a decision of it finishing the first round. But maybe with the difference in size, and, as I think it was Harry made the point there about, the higher up you go in the weight classes, the tougher it is, I suppose, to become a dominant wrestler. Like, look at, say, a guy like Curtis Blades, who runs into Francis Ngannou, gets absolutely fucking decimated and clocked twice. Now, that's not going to happen, I don't think, against Shammy, but it could be harder to implement that wrestling. Chances are he will, if not immediately, eventually. And I do think he will win, but it's a good test at this stage of his career, I think, whether he moves down or he doesn't.
Absolutely. Spencer, your quick thoughts before we move on?
I mean, exactly what everybody's saying. There's a reason this fight has been booked 3 times. It's because this is the right test for Jailton Almeida. It's fallen apart a couple times, injuries, visa issues, things like that. This is the guy they look at and go, if he can get through this one, then he's in the top 15. We know we reset where the baseline is, and then we start seeing some of the tests. And look, if he goes out and runs through Abdurakhimov on Saturday, just skip him right into facing like Jairzinho. Just throw him right in there of facing Alexander Volkov, and let's figure this out. Because he's 31, and heavyweight can always use a new name, so we don't get the fights that Sean hates between Volkov and Rosenstrike, where one's 7, one's 8, and when they're done, one is 7 and one is 8. Let's see if we can get somebody new in there. And if it doesn't work out, 205's there, because I think the same as you. 205 is probably the better division for him overall. If you can hang out here and fight at 225, 230 and have success, do it. Ride it till the wheels fall off.
Indeed. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I know Sean is waiting with bated breath for the next card after this, which is Derek Lewis versus Sergey Spivak as serving as your main event. It's on Yeah, it's on air at 6. Hey, you're normally used to staying up late, Sean. It'll actually, by the time that card will probably be starting at the time you're normally used to going to bed. So it'll be interesting.
I'll be recording the podcast on a Saturday that Harry and Spencer will be doing the takeaways. Enjoy. He'll hear the recap there, and I'm fucking. They can go and fuck themselves on that now. Shout out to the people in Korea. They can watch it. Fair play to them.
I love it. I love it. Last but not least, the last fight I'd like to focus on is that of Terence McKinney. Again, Ishmael Bonfim in the lightweight division. Look, we had a little bit of a conversation with Terence McKinney before we kind of came on, and I kind of described Terence McKinney of having the touch of the Kevin Holland sometimes, where I think in the fight against Faris Saim, we've seen Terence McKinney as the mixed martial artist. I think against Drew Dober, we've seen Terence McKinney the entertainer. And I think against Eric Gonzalez in his last fight, we got back to him being a mixed martial artist. And I think that's a facet of his game that he's going to need to figure out if he's going to progress up through the rankings. He's calling for fights with Paddy Pimblett and everything like that. But you need to go out there and beat someone like Ishmael Bonfim and put him away relatively easy and use your time on the microphone. Harry, how do you feel about that assessment from me? Do you feel the same? Do you feel different about Terence McKinney? What's your thoughts on him?
I'm quite high on Terence McKinney. I just think that, as you guys have said, there is a portion of him that needs to realize that the entertainment has to come, not necessarily, like Shawnee's talked about this, right? I'm fucking just stealing everything Sean says all the time. But like what we talked about on one of the Speakers Corners episodes is like, the experience and the skill levels have to kind of match, right? Like you don't want to be so skilled and you're fighting bums because that doesn't do anything, but you don't want to be fighting absolute monsters all the time and your skills down here somewhere. And I feel like the stock and the entertainment value has to do, like if we could add a third tier to that graph, that's like the entertainment side. And for Terence McKinney, it feels like the skills and the experience are tracking nicely, but the stardom he's thinking is like shooting all the way fucking up here. And I think the best fighters are that the stardom is just peaking just a point or 3 points just above the skills and experience. Everyone thinks you're a fucking brilliant fighter, and the time that you take for the skills and experience to rise with that stardom can come nicely. And I think for Terence, if he just puts a little bit less stock in the stardom and allows it to trickle back to more of a natural point, and he puts more into the skills and experience, he's a really exciting fighter. He hits really hard. He moves really well. He can absolutely do the fighting things. But I think if he focuses on the fighting things and less on the, I must go out and be entertaining here, you won't see the mistakes against Drew Dober. He just puts Drew Dober out in the second round, right? He paces himself in the first, beats the shit out of him, and then puts him away in the second. That it's not the fight that we saw just now. I think this is the right fight in Bonfim. It's a guy that isn't going to cause him drastic problems like a Drew Dober. It's somebody that he can go out. If he wants to do the 3 rounds, 15 minutes, go out and do the thing, I got no problems with that whatsoever. If he wants to do the Nurmagomedov route where he goes out and beats him technically for 2.5 rounds and then says, right, I got some gas, I'll put the NOS on, I'll shove my foot down and I'll get this guy out of here, I got no problem with that at all. But I think this is the point for the next 2 or 3 fights this year. Terence McKinney goes away and allows his skills to rise to the level of the stardom that he thinks he is. And then we can see him in a big fight.
Absolutely beautiful. Ain't no following that. Spencer, I'm going to go to you. Would you like to hop in there, Sean?
Just quickly, 2 quick points. Drew Dober, I was dead fucking right. I said Drew Dober can go on a run, and he's won like 5 fights in a row. I'm that right, so it's credit to me. And also, Terence McKinney unfollowed me on Twitter, so I'm really down on him as a fighter.
Oh my God, how could he? How could he? That's his loss.
I understand it, to be fair.
Yeah. Do you know what it could have been? What did you say that might maybe disparaged him?
Oh, no idea. Probably just tweeting sense, as usual.
That's it, yeah. Spencer, break us through the rest of the cards. Obviously, there's a bunch of other great fights on the prelims as well. We just don't have the time to talk about them all in great detail. Please take me through some of the highlights that you're looking forward to and some of the fights or fighters that you're looking forward to seeing on the prelim section before we wrap it up.
I mean, I'm always happy to see a little Gregory RoboCop Rodriguez. I want to see the scar in the middle of his forehead from the freakish cut last time against Chidi and Jokawani. I just want to see what it looks like now. Does he have a very distinct scar.
They put a zipper in it, and there's like a third eye that comes out, and every time he puts it up.
I'm always happy to see Thiago Moises back in there. He's somebody that I think has some upside in this division. We talked about Ishmael Bonfim. His younger brother Gabriel is fighting Munir Lazez. He's 12-0, 13-0, coming off Contender Series.
Fuck Munir Lazez.
That's an interesting fight. Fuck Munir Lazez, as we all say. And then, I mean, look, Lewin Lacerda is a guy coming from Nova União. He's getting thrown right in the deep end against Cody Stamen. Perfect fight, sink or swim, right? If you're going to be here and you think you got some upside, beat this dude who just fell out of the rankings in the last year or so. And if you can, great. There's big names waiting for you at bantamweight. And if not, fine. There's still some really fun fights for you at bantamweight. So that's always interesting. And I mean, look, we're getting a featherweight fight. And I know we had an announcement very recently that there's another one on the table. So could the women's featherweight division become a thing in 2023? I'm interested to see this. I'm fine with watching Josiane Nunes beat the shit out of Zara Farron on Saturday. That one's ending in a hurry. Josiane's going to smash her with big power. She's going to smash her with big power. Zara Farron hasn't seen like the 4th minute of either of her UFC fights. So little preview to tomorrow's Severe Picks and Plays for Ian and I. Probably going to be a Josiane Nunes pick in there somewhere.
Put the house on it. That's it. If I have any money left after last week.
If you have any money left after last week. I won't be throwing any houses on anything. But yeah, I mean, there's some fun fights. It should be entertaining. I love that it's Brazil versus the world, aside from the 2 fights where it's Brazil versus Brazil.
Warley Alves and Nicholas Alvey. What a fight that is. Like, Warley Alves, Nicholas Alvey. That could be fight of the night.
Just a fun, perfect fight in the middle of the prelims, right? Doesn't have to have any stakes. They're going to beat the hell out of each other.
Blood.
Grand.
Guaranteed blood.
Absolutely. It's going to be an interesting fight. Even the first fight, watching back to 2 guys, Daniel Marcos will be making his debut against Simon Oliveira. 2 guys that like to stand and bang. So if you're into watching the early prelims, I'd tune in early for that one as well. But a good card stacked from top to bottom. And will it be the turn of Jamahal Hill in the main event? Can he go in and take out the old dog? Can he prove Shawnee right? We'll never hear the fucking end of it if he does.
You better hope he fucking loses. You better hope he loses.
And we're in for another barn burner in the flyweight division as Deiveson Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno will square off for the 4th time. I'm excited for this fight. I know the lads are excited for this fight. You should be excited for all the fights on Saturday night. I hope you enjoy them all. To hear some breakdown on the card, obviously Sean and Graham will touch on it on Sunday, and Harry and Spencer will break it down in great detail the following Tuesday on the takeaways. There will be some more reaction as well on our SevereMMA Patreon. You can get that right up by Shawnee's noggin there in the top corner. You can scan that code. That will bring you over to the SevereMMA Patreon account. Lots of content there for you to enjoy. Check out the Owl Triangle on our YouTube. We have a new episode out this week as well on all podcast platforms as well. Check the Owl Triangle out. Severe Spotlight is back this week. Alan Nascimento was the highlight there. I'm looking forward to seeing who the highlight is off this card. Spencer is churning out content as he always does. 10 questions about everything. You tell me what you have, because it's nearly too much for me to say, Spencer.
1 question for every fight. 10 things I like. And then kicking your ass in picks and plays.
I love it. Plus
10 questions for every fight. That'd be a fucking
Jesus,
long
even
one.
I can't. Even I can't get to that. Even I can't get through 10.
And also check out a conversation with an excellent series over on our YouTube channel as well. Brad Wharton, the great Brad Wharton, is with Spencer this week. And it's always a good podcast to listen into. That rounds us up for this week. The UFC started off strong. They're coming in hot with this pay-per-view. We're getting an early week off, guys, after this card. So we won't be back next week, but we'll be back the following week to cover the barn burner of a fight card. That is Derek Lewis and Sergey Spivak. I hope you all enjoy the fights on Saturday night. I'll be back again with Spencer on Friday for the picks and plays. Looking for a bit of redemption. He's been taking shots behind my back this week, and I'm going to come out guns a-blazing on Friday on that podcast. So I look forward to doing that. We look forward to breaking down the cards, as always, with the lads this year. Goodbye, good luck, and God bless. I don't know what went wrong there.